Welcome to our third episode of marketSHARE, connecting the world of real estate and delivering insights from the industry's greatest game changers and thought leaders. My name is Jason Hardy, Managing Partner and President at Chatterson. A big thank you to our media sponsor, PropMoto, and a big thanks to our industry partners from across the country for supporting our conversation today: BOMA, Informa, NAIOP, Urban Analytics, the Urban Land Institute, and Chatterson. Our topic today is reigniting consumer confidence. We'll talk about the new normal and learn from the real estate's leading organizations across all asset classes on how they're planning to engage with customers now and into the future. As reported by the Conference Board, the Canadian Index of Consumer Confidence fell by 41 points in April, a record decline. The index now is at 47.6, the lowest level ever. That's a 73-point drop in just 2 months. In the United States, the index now stands at 86.9, the lowest level in nearly 6 years. There's much work to be done and an opportunity for our industry to truly step up. I'd like to introduce you to our guest today. First, Brian McCauley, President and CEO at Concert Properties. Brian oversees the diverse real estate activities of Concert's $4 billion portfolio and led their expansion into the Ontario market in 2001. Concert has continued to grow and diversify their extensive portfolio over the years, operating in multiple asset classes including multifamily, seniors communities, office, industrial, and even a number of infrastructure properties across Canada. Great to have you with us on marketSHARE today, Brian.
Thanks, Jason.
Next up, Mr. Carlos Valverde, who currently serves as Vice President of Real Estate Development with world-renowned Silverstein Properties in New York. Silverstein Properties is a privately held, full-service real estate development and investment firm. Carlos and his team manage a portfolio of more than 40 million square feet of office, retail, hotel, and residential. More recently, Carlos's time has been spent managing the development of the World Trade Center Towers 3 and 4 and the soon-to-open global headquarters for the Walt Disney World Company, spanning more than 2 million square feet of vertical campus. Thanks for joining us today, Carlos.
Thank you. A pleasure.
Lastly, I'd like to welcome Benjamin Pleat, who is the CEO and founder of the award-winning community engagement platform, kobu. kobu stands for Community Building. Is that correct, Ben?
That is correct.
kobu is an app-based software platform designed to connect neighbors and neighborhoods, turning apartments into homes. Ben was telling me the idea came from his mother when she moved to New York and found herself feeling incredibly isolated and lonely, desperately seeking ways to connect with residents and others in her new neighborhood in New York. By creating a strong sense of community, kobu helps leading building managers, HOAs, and property owners create engagement with and among residents. Ben and his team at kobu are growing their portfolio of customers by the day with some pretty big name users already on board with the platform, including Bozzuto, AIG, Alliance, Gables Residential, and Boston Properties. Prior to founding kobu, Ben led teams at Goldman Sachs, WeWork, and the Harvard Innovation Lab. Great to have you today, Ben.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Gentlemen, first, let's start on a really important topic of leadership, which is incredibly critical at these unprecedented times right now. A question for each of you. Looking back over the past few months, how have you guided your team to find opportunities to pivot or differentiate? Carlos, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So Jason, for many years now, we've tried to establish some telecommuting protocols in our office. We've kind of waffled with that because we just haven't really had the need. And this pandemic really just catapulted it forward. And so from the onset, we decided that we needed to have a daily Teams meeting. And so we have 2 Teams meetings every day, one in the morning for every project and one in the evening for the entire department. The morning meeting, it's great because it puts you in the camera with all your peers and bosses and colleagues at 8:30 in the morning. So you had better be in the shower and dressed and ready to go at 8:30 in the morning. And the one at 4:30 in the afternoon is also a really good way to just catch up and talk business, talk shop, but also some of the typical water cooler banter that you have with your friends and colleagues in the office. And so in that sense, that was one thing that we didn't really realize that when we were trying to figure out how do we telecommute. And it's really about just the constant communication with your team members. And we've seen that even though there's a lot of that Zoom fatigue that exists, that daily casual conversation is extremely necessary for the success of our projects.
Thanks, Carlos. That's great. Over to you, Brian. What are you doing during these times in terms of leadership and sort of engaging that team?
Yeah, I think there's two things, Jason. One of them that Carlos has led to, or has suggested here, and that's communications generally and broadly. One of the things I recognized very early as people started to work remotely was the importance of them feeling connected and so we really ramped up our communications, not just amongst teams and on a project basis, as Carlos has suggested, but company-wide. It's very important for me to be able to tell people what else is going on around us and how we were quickly adapting to new ways of doing business in working remotely. So for me, it was a conscious effort to communicate clearly and frequently. So I've instituted a CEO chat with our staff on a weekly basis and now bi-weekly basis where, I'll have 200 or 250 people on a Skype call, and I'll be able to tell them specifically what's going on, how we're doing, how we're adapting. And I think that's been very, very effective. And then, as Carlos said, right down through the team level and on a project by project basis, that we've really ramped up communication. And it's very important that people, you try and find a way to maintain the culture within your organization, that people truly feel connected, because that's, I think, what everybody is missing. And then I think the other thing from our perspective is that necessity truly is the motherhood of invention. And we've adopted things over the last 12 weeks that, frankly, like Carlos said, should have been done a long time ago. But out of necessity, we've been able to ramp this up and move things forward faster, whether it's a better connection with our tenants in our residential portfolio or our commercial portfolio, allowing them to make direct deposit payments on a monthly basis, or whether it's dealing with our suppliers and vendors and using electronic fund transfers and things that frankly should have been the way we do it forever. We hadn't done it and hadn't ramped it up fast enough, but this has forced us to do that. So quite a few things that have been real education for me over the last 12 weeks.
That's phenomenal. I love the idea of the weekly CEO chat with the whole company. It's brilliant. Finally, over to you, Ben. You're in the prop tech world. You're in software technology for multifamily real estate. What does that leadership really look like in your own company over the past few months?
Yeah, I mean, really, it's forced us to adapt, and I think as Carlos and Brian said really well, I think in many ways, as humans, we're definitely craving that connection. I know I am. So we tried to keep the cadence of communication on the team really clear. We have daily check-ins, weekly check-ins, monthly team meetings as well. We've tried to just make sure everybody feels like they can have that water cooler banter. As a business, we kind of came back to two of our core values through this time period. One is sparking joy, and two is creating value and kind of innovating in that process. We have a huge opportunity as a business. We had as everything started to kind of foster and help create that sense of connection when it was needed most. It was important pre-COVID and critically important through COVID and beyond. And the team really galvanized around that mission of empowering people to feel like they belong in these places that they call home. And as a team, we came back to that mission, we came back to our values as much as we could, and we tried to have fun in the process and stay focused and motivated. So, really forced us to double down, stay focused, and be there for each other in that process.
Oh, that's great, Ben. I love that. I love tying it back to the core values. So important during times like this, and yet so simple. Carlos, Brian, I'm going to go over to you. We haven't really experienced anything like this in our lifetime at all. As developers operating in multiple asset classes, is there anything that you've learned from previous downturns, particularly 2008, 2009, that's guiding your response in communications? What's different this time with COVID-19? Why don't we start with you, Brian?
Sure. I think the biggest difference is the length of time it's going to take us to truly recover from what we're going through today. if you look back to 9/11, the planes were flying within days. There were knock-on effects of what happened from 9/11, certainly increased security at airports and a number of other things that became new norms. But at the end of the day, it was barely a hiccup compared to where we are today. If you look at '08 and '09, and I get the benefit, as Jason does, to think of it from a Canadian perspective, our ability to get through '08 and '09 in Canada was dramatically better than what happened south of the 49th parallel. But even for us, it was a matter of probably 9 to 12 months before we saw things back to normal following that. And then, frankly, it continued to accelerate dramatically coming out of '08 and '09. I think this one has just been, first and foremost, a health crisis worldwide that is now leading to an economic crisis worldwide. And I think it's just going to take us an awful long time to find out what the new norm will be and how we will adjust across all of our asset classes and in our business going forward. I'm very optimistic, as I said at the outset, that we will do this. It'll just take us a much greater length of time to get there. But I think, as others have alluded to, I think the key about recovery and going forward, and one of the things we learn, is how important your brand is and how important you as a company are and how you treat your customers, your clients, and your tenants going through this. That's you building that loyalty over a long period of time. We've been in business for 30 years, and building that loyalty comes back to pay off in spades as you come through something like this. So we're very confident that based on who we are and how we treat our consultants, contractors, tenants, and others, that I think we'll weather this okay.
That's phenomenal. Thank you so much, Brian. Over to you, Carlos. Your thoughts?
Yeah, same thing. There are some similarities between 2008 and the current economic crisis, but I think overall, the 2008 crisis was really a result of predatory lending and bad loans, and it was governmental and institutional risks that let it happen. This one, as Brian eloquently said, it's a virus, it's a health crisis. And so if it weren't for this, a lot of companies, a lot of industries were on track to have a great year in 2020. The New York City vacancy rate for apartment buildings was less than 3%. We were on record to have a great year for leasing activity as well. And retail, with all its struggles, was trying to find a way to reinvent itself, not just as the regular shopping, but experiences on the street. And so I'm optimistic that we are going to be able to get out of this. I think that we will definitely it will take us some time to do so. But every single time, whether it's after 9/11 or 2008, we can see the economy rise and we can see the stock market rising. And I think we're still obviously in its infancy right now, and we're really only 3 months into this here on North America. So we have yet a lot to see and a lot of yet to be determined.
Thank you so much, Carlos. Appreciate that. Ben, your app Kobu enables residents to easily engage with one another and build a sense of community through virtual and in-person experiences. For the multifamily developers you've been partnering with or even courting, how has the pitch for Kobu changed given the current world of social distancing that we're living in now?
Yeah, we've definitely had to adapt. I think we're grateful that we were always a virtual community building tool and kind of enabling property management teams to be more effective with whatever marketing or kind of brand or experience spend that they had, and also enabling residents to do that. A lot of what we did, pre-COVID was really trying to drive virtual engagement to in-person engagement, and obviously with social distancing and shelter-in-place orders, we pivot a lot of that from virtual to virtual. And I think one of the learnings that we've had is it's much easier to go virtual to virtual than to in-person, and you're able to add value. So we've definitely adapted by really kind of showcasing that directly back to our current customers, having much more frequent conversations with them, sharing data, sharing learnings, and kind of tweaking strategies as we go. And then to prospective customers, trying to be there and support as many as we can. We've seen, frankly, a massive surge in demand from apartment building owners and managers who've wanted to go live with Kobu within days. And just in the past 2 months, we've grown nationwide, to Seattle, to Los Angeles, Denver, Atlanta, New York, Boston, continued growth in DC and Boston as well, and continuing to grow. So we've tried to help as much as we can. We're hearing retention's even more critical and even more important as churning residents is more painful and more costly these days. And also, kind of showcasing what you're doing for your residents. I think Brian said it really well earlier. This is a great brand building moment. This is a marquee moment for an ownership company, a management company to showcase why they're different and why they care about their residents. And in a time period where unfortunately we can't come in person together, we can't see our tenants, we can't see our residents in person, we can't engage and convalesce in these common spaces and amenity areas. How do we support each other? And we found kobu to be a great tool for residents to do that, and we've tried to help as much as we can in that process. So a lot of virtual communications with our clients, obviously via Zoom, and trying to keep those partnerships strong and doing as much as we can do for residents to support them through these tough times.
Yeah, what an incredible opportunity for you and awareness for kobu, where connection is more important now than ever before, and it's exactly what kobu's delivering. Pretty incredible. Thanks so much, Ben.
Jason, can I jump in on Ben's comment?
Absolutely.
From our perspective, look, we have about 5,000 rental residential tenants. I wish I had met you, Ben, before I was invited to join this call by Jason, but I'm glad I have met you, because we've had to, with a less sophisticated program than you've developed, we've done exactly the same thing in terms of trying to connect our communities. So we created very early on in this, we recognized the need for what we called virtual villages, and the need for connecting our residents who were now housebound and shut in, and for them to neighbor to get to know themselves and get to know their community better. And it's been a strong push for us on the sustainability front anyways, because often the social sustainability part rarely gets spoken about. But we're dealing with greater, as we go through greater urbanization and intensification of our downtown cores, we're seeing more and more loneliness and isolation creeping into our communities. And I think programs like kobu, which I will definitely reach out and chat more about, and the things that we've done to try and connect our residents is so critically important, and it's just been amplified based on what we're going through today. So
yeah, really appreciate you sharing that. I mean, it's been frankly incredible to see how resilient these communities are in the face of such difficult times, and it really brings out the humanity in people, right? Property managers are humans, landlords are humans, residents are humans. So it's a shared experience among us all, and one that brings us closer together. And that sounds like you're doing some amazing stuff. That's great to hear.
Yeah, wonderful. That's incredible. Timing's perfect for you right now, Ben, no doubt. Next, I'd like to talk about how we're communicating with our customers across the various industry sectors. This is an interesting one for us, being a real estate marketing company. When it comes to the impact of this pandemic on consumer confidence, no two asset classes are the same. And the messaging really can't be one size fits all. That's what we're really realizing over the past few months at Chatterson. For example, in the residential world, conceivably, it's more difficult now to purchase a home than it is to lease an apartment. Banks, with very good reason, are tightening their lending restrictions despite historically low interest rates. There's a ton going on right now. Carlos, over to you a little bit. At Silverstein Properties, you've been responsible for many cutting-edge commercial projects in New York, Tower 3 and 4 of the World Trade Center, the new Disney headquarters, which is breaking ground this fall. You've spoken of the difficulty of building in New York and looking towards the future as regulations and codes are constantly changing. How are these constraints impacting how you respond to shifting office tenant needs? Is there a way to future-proof these projects?
I think future-proofing is a difficult term to use because every one of our tenants is extremely knowledgeable and savvy about what's going on, and ultimately it goes even beyond them a little bit. Here in New York City, there are two huge hurdles that I think we have to overcome in order to be able to really bring back office tenants into our buildings. One is the subway and train system. Is it safe? Is it ready? Can it handle the 4 million people that that have a daily use for it? And so that's one giant hurdle that we need to get past. And then the second one is reopening the schools here in New York City. And to be frank with you, I haven't heard anything in the news or from talking colleagues of mine that there's any real plan in place. I don't think anybody wants to gamble with anybody's child's well-being. And so I think for working parents to go back to the office on a regular 9 to 5, it's going to be very challenging. Within our buildings and within our properties, we've gone above and beyond everything that we think we can do in order to be able to bring a sense of comfort and safety to our tenants. We've doubled down on our cleaning, on our rotation. We've invested and started to look into different technologies of how we can use our existing MEP systems and enhance them in order to be able to deal with a health crisis better. Some examples are specifically our air conditioning system. How do we bring more fresh outside air into the system? How do we pressurize certain floors, certain rooms, and certain areas in order to have a positive, negative pressure so that there's no cross-contamination? We're looking into UV lights, replacing filters to be a higher grade, even robotics to clean the ductwork from the inside out. And so there's a lot of things that we are looking into. Everything's on the table. And we want to be able to take also a little bit of our tenants' lead on this, because ultimately every company is going to be responsible for their safety of their own workers. And we just want to make sure that it is in compliance with what we want for the building as a whole.
Brian, in the multifamily category, there are new considerations for developers when designing and managing properties to future-proof these projects. Anything you're reevaluating for Concerts, Burquitlam Park, Langara Gardens sites in Vancouver, even your 603 Sherman development in Toronto?
I think that generally speaking, it kind of picks up on some of the things that Ben was mentioning about kobu and what we're talking about in terms of social integration. We've been on a push across the design of all of our new multi-res projects to ensure that we have a really keen eye on the amenity package and the offering that we're providing. So as you know, probably in New York City and probably other places, our addressing affordability has led to smaller and smaller units. And that's how we've created affordability across most of our portfolios. And the missing piece to that, of course, is how do people escape their smaller and smaller units? And we need to right-size the amenity package that we're offering within our community. So we're looking at how not to just build single building standalone amenities that cater to the single tenants within a building, but most of our projects coming down the pipeline are master plan communities. They're phased developments that allow us to actually think collectively about the amenities that are being created across a number of buildings and possibly centralizing some of those. But I think one of the things we'll learn coming out of this is I think the unit sizes in multi-res will be addressed again. Is it necessary to create additional bedroom spaces? Will people pay for that? You know, one of the challenges here in the city of Vancouver is the fact that the ideal thing that we would have benefited from today in a smaller unit may be a second bedroom. And in order to do that in a high-rise point tower, often the best way to do that is with a buried bedroom or a second den or something like that. Those are not permitted in the city of Vancouver, as an example. So I think one of the things we'll see, hopefully, is some regulatory change that comes out to allow us to create better, more usable spaces for our residents within their suites. And then I think the collection of amenity offering that we put together on a building by building basis and or a community basis will be a focus for us going forward.
Now, this is a little bit, related, but just question for you, Brian, on that. Will that drive prices up even further? If the unit square foot size is increasing, your amenity spaces or the included amenities are increasing, does that increase the price obviously as well?
Yeah, and it depends on the jurisdiction that you're building in, whether it's here in Canada, the City of Toronto or City of Vancouver or other places. There are different requirements for amenities within the buildings anyways, and that's already dictated by many zoning bylaws and the other. But the simple answer to your question is yes. I mean, we all sell, unfortunately, on a price per pound basis. And the reality is the larger the suite is, the more expensive it is. And so we'll have to figure out exactly how that works over time. But people may realize that they need to pay for that space, and they may be willing to pay for that space going forward.
Yeah, definitely willing to pay after this. 3 months cooped up. I'm sure many in a one-bedroom apartment are wishing it was 2 or 3. Ben, kobu works directly with multifamily developers and managers to create engagement between residents and neighborhoods. What engagement opportunities do you see in other asset classes, including office, retail, and hospitality?
Yeah, I mean, first off, as a business, we're definitely laser focused on multifamily. We want to become the best in the world at what we do and empowering great living experiences in the places where people call home. I think having said that, there are a bunch of transferable learnings from multifamily and broadly across the spectrum to retail, to office, etc. I think the first thing, and I think Brian said it really well, is really thinking about how you program these spaces rather than how you provide these spaces. I think the past few months have been a really great example of amenity spaces going empty. And I think, to be fully honest, at least our data shows that was happening before. And I think obviously this is a very vivid example, but thinking more about how you can program these spaces, how you can engage with them is really critical, especially as we all are looking for that human connection. But actually doing something is more important and more impactful than the idea of being able to use a media room to watch film that you don't end up watching. So that's definitely a kind of a transferable learning that we've really seen and kind of advised our clients who are bringing on new communities to their portfolio. How do you is it creating bigger spaces for residents and smaller spaces for amenities, and being a little more thoughtful around allocating some of the hardscape budget to providing some programming opportunities for the property management to host building events or to host virtual events these days. Those are kind of things that we're seeing, and we're definitely seeing the same thing on the office side as well. I mean, fundamentally, at least our belief as a company is real estate is an experience business. It's a relationship-driven business, and relationships happen in person as human beings. And these buildings are incredibly well-positioned to provide great relationships and great connecting opportunities for their residents as well as their tenants. And kind of thinking about that and just learning more about your residents, learning more about your tenants, getting more data, and kind of catering to that. One of our core tenets of how communities get built is this idea of mutual influence, this agency that I can make my community better, my community makes me better. That really comes back to feedback, that comes back to data, and providing a way to empower your residents and tenants to tell you what they want. And I think a lot of that is evident in exactly what Carlos said around the dialogue, the communications with tenants to make sure that they're comfortable, they feel safe, as well as feel heard. And I think it really will make the asset class and the overall industry much stronger as we go on.
Well, thank you so much, Ben. I think it segues perfectly into the next topic I want to discuss, which is really the topic of consumer behavior. At Chatterson earlier this year, we launched an online customer engagement tool called Only. It allows home seekers to shop, build, price, and buy their home from their couch. For years, we've been told by developers, builders, that customers don't want to buy a home online. So providing customers with this capability previously was a hard no for us. It wasn't until this pandemic hit that sales centers closed and that they recognized the value of these tools to really be able to engage consumers online. A question for everyone today: ensuring a quick recovery assumes consumers won't change their behavior once the economy reopens. Do you foresee any significant changes in consumer behavior as a result of much of the population living, working, and shopping from home for many months to come? Carlos, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I mean, absolutely. I think people in general are going to have a tendency to try and save money, save cash, tight in their wallet, whether you're employed or not. I think that's the general feeling for a lot of people on a personal financial sense. I think also people will start valuing some things more so than others. Like you said, Jason, I think people that are cooped up in one-bedroom apartments really see the value of having a 2-3 bedroom, a backyard, like Brian said, a den. Even that would be, tremendous relief. And also proximity to beaches and parks in the city. I think that would also create a large sense of what that community that we were talking about before. Some diehard New Yorkers who've been here all their lives, I've now heard them say, I'm really looking to buy a house in the burbs. And so to me, that's shocking. At the same time, we also see that we can start living with a lot of the things that we can start living now with a lot of the things that we used to take for granted, right? People would buy $4 or $5 cups of coffees, and listen, I'm the first one to realize I can brew my own cup nowadays. People take $40 gym classes, not for a month, but for a single 1 hour class, right? People can now run on the outside and it's free. And so there's a lot of sentiment, I feel, that we're going to see a realization and back into what would be a little bit of a simpler times. The rise of Amazon, I just don't see that going away anytime soon. And we as developers are trying to figure out, what's the package room looking like nowadays, both the dry and the cold storage, because that's the reality. People don't want to see packages being bundled up in your lobby, and you just have to manage to that. And at the same time, I see many New Yorkers kind of doubling down on the whole reason of why they came to live here, right? Even though those things, the arts, the culture, the networking is gone or put on pause for now, I think once New York opens back, it's going to come roaring back. And I hope they do it within reason and in a safe manner. But I think people are just itching to come back, to do the networking, to do the shopping, to go to the movies, to go to the theaters, to go to the restaurants, because this is the reason why they moved to New York City. And to take that away from them, I think is going to be a difficult thing to do. In any case, it's like my boss, Larry Silverstein, says, never bet against New York, and we truly believe it.
Thank you, Carlos. Brian, your thoughts?
The only thing, I thought Carlos said that really well. The only thing I'd add to that is, we were in this ever escalating sense of urgency leading into COVID-19, really been generating for the last decade or so. And I actually think one of the behavioral changes, or one of the things that will carry on, is that sense of urgency will even get greater. The fact that we've been able to shop online and do things with instant return, wait overnight to get our Amazon parcel or whatever it is, I actually think this will just ramp it up. I think people's expectations will be for more urgent service than we've been delivering in the past. And I think that's one of the things that we, as developers and builders and suppliers, we need to actually be able to react faster to. I think I said earlier, necessity is the motherhood of invention, and I actually think we need to ramp up our ability to deliver faster. And that's the expectation of all of our tenants. Doesn't matter whether it's a residential tenant or commercial tenant, a seniors lifestyle community tenant, there's going to be a higher level of expectation on service than we probably have seen in the past.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. Ben, thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think Carlos and Brian said it super well. And as a native New Yorker, completely agree. Never bet against New York. Really, we've seen a lot of exactly what you said kind of play out in the data that we have from our communities. We've got communities in dozens of cities, and we're seeing very similar patterns start to emerge. And I think it's obviously early, and in many cases, the coronavirus situation is still in full swing. Obviously, it's knock on wood, subsiding. A few trends that we're seeing. One is that thirst for human connection. It's there. It's a human need. The second one is really how people are embracing their local neighborhoods. We're seeing a ton of interaction within the kobu platform in these communities where people are asking for best local recommendations, how they can support local restaurants, how they can support local merchants, how they can support local institutions, volunteering, helping each other. I mean, crises are definitely tough, difficult times, but people do tend to come together, and we see that. So there's some sort of tension there between kind of the going towards Amazon versus going towards your local shop or whatever it is. And I think the combination of those two, it's kind of the instant gratification, the instant on-demand economy that Brian correctly said. Like, we expect things so quickly, and at the same time, we love the authenticity of kind of supporting our local neighborhoods that make where we live so vibrant. Especially as Brian mentioned, like, this is what we expect, and as Carlos mentioned, people will want that that human connection of going to a local restaurant or going to a venue in retail, whatever it is. I think there's a combination there that we're seeing in the data that I think will persist. And I think on top of that, the one other thing that we're also seeing is there is a hesitation from residents, at least in the multifamily context, to go back to these 50, 100, multi-thousand person events or experiences. So we think there's going to be a shift on the social side, more towards kind of intimate gatherings, 5, 10, maybe 15 people max for one, safety reasons, and two, I think there's a benefit of kind of having more intimate conversations there. So there might be some larger transferable learnings from that. But again, very early days in terms of the metrics that we're seeing.
Thanks, Ben. Well, sticking with you, Ben, while we're on it, Kobu's mantra is all about solving residential loneliness. With the lockdown leading to reduced social interaction and increased loneliness, how have your community managers adapted to the experiences for their tenants and the tenants' needs? How does this engagement improve retention for your clients like Bozzuto and Boston Properties?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the Kobu platform has kind of a software element, but a really critical human touch elements, these virtual community managers to help inspire, engage, moderate, etc. And we've really leaned into that side of our platform. Building communities, it takes a human touch, and we've definitely elevated how much trust, attention, and kind of emphasis we put on that. One of the big things we've seen is just enabling a platform for residents to kind of be there for each other. So we've made it so much easier for residents to run errands for immune compromised neighbors. We've seen residents use the platform for sharing childcare resources. We've seen the platform used for residents to showcase their skills and connect with those that have a similar interest, whether it be Bollywood dancing, one of our residents in Boston, or flower arranging for one of our residents in Atlanta. In many ways, kind of creating that attachment to your building, to the community, as Brian said earlier, it's critical. It's happening right now, and people will remember, what happens in your building and how your property staff interacted with you during these difficult times, and may ask that question to you in the future. One example of something we've seen with Bozzuto here in the U.S. is around one resident who used the Kobu platform to do a balcony concert series for her neighbors, and this past. So 3 weeks ago, she actually had one of her neighbors reached out to her via Kobu and asked her to play a particularly special song to him and his partner, and he ended up proposing to his now fiance in front of his entire apartment complex. That's a moment that, it's too early to correlate that directly back to the impact, but a special human moment that the entire building will remember. He had 50, 60 people watching, and that certainly he'll remember, and in many ways will create kind of better satisfaction, retention, and just attachment to that leading community, and really kind of doing things like that. Obviously not marriage proposals every single week, but just trying to support and empower as much as we can in that process.
I love it. Community engagement at its finest. Brian, over to you. The City of Vancouver announced plans to fast track the review and approval process for a number of affordable and market rental development applications, including Concerts Langara Gardens. The affordability crisis is rampant in major cities from Vancouver to Toronto to San Francisco to New York. How can government and developers work better together to revamp housing strategies that address not only investors but residents?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm not sure where you read that fast tracking by the City of Vancouver, but I can tell you it's not happening. But one of the stories that or certainly one of the themes that I'm working on a daily basis with all levels of government, provincially, federally, and in the municipalities that we do work with here and across the country, is let's not let a good crisis go to waste. And that is, look, we need to take this moment in time and truly make transformational change. I think every one of us in this business have been burdened by far too much red tape over the last several years. I'm sure New York is a nightmare. But at the end of the day, if we're really going to do a couple things here, if we're going to address housing affordability, one of the biggest issues is getting more supply built. If we're going to ignite the economies again and provide some stimulus for recovery and redevelopment, we need to get people working again, and we need to get projects built. So we're certainly making the pitch to every level of government right now that, look, let's take this opportunity and make transformational change to the approvals process, remove red tape, and streamline our activities so that we can start to, number one, jumpstart the economy, and number two, deliver on housing supply that is needed to create greater affordability. But it is, it's a lifelong journey for me in this business, to be honest with you, but it's just got ridiculously slower over the last several years. And we need to take this moment in time to really make significant change. But I would love to tell you that things are really truly being fast-tracked in the municipalities we're doing work in, but it's not really the case.
Well, thanks, Brian. Maybe fake news at its finest. Sorry.
Aspirational news.
Aspirational news. A hope and a prayer.
Yeah, exactly.
Carlos, it seems New York is at the epicenter of the pandemic, with news every day about New Yorkers fleeing the city for areas like Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Albany. What actions is Silverstein taking in the retail, residential, and office verticals to instill confidence and engage with customers and tenants under lockdown as the New York economy prepares to reopen?
So I think the most important thing we can do is, first of all, is to listen, right? We sit at a perch where we can listen to tenants from over 2,000 residential units that we have and over 10 million square feet of office building. And so that's both an advantage and a disadvantage, because we get to hear every perspective in every scenario. At the end of the day, listen, individual tenants and individual companies are going to have to figure out how to self-regulate and how to social distance themselves and how to implement these decisions by themselves. We as landlords are basically putting everything on the table right now. Technology, processes, just simply informing the public, our tenants, is of paramount importance. I think as we are getting closer to overcome this health triage in New York City, I think there's going to be many lessons to be learned. After 9/11, we learned many lessons about security and planning and fire alarm systems and whatnot. After 2008, we learned many lessons about how to finance our own projects. And I think now we're going to look into how do we build and design buildings with healthcare in mind. I was reading an article the other day about, usually for a development project, we have over 20 different consultants, architects, engineers, whatnot, about the possibility of adding now a health consultant and having sort of a wellness expert be involved. And this is really not a new topic or a new trend, but it was something that people didn't really know whether they should invest in this or not. I think now more so than ever, people will realize that having wellness and well-being in their buildings, in their office buildings, is of paramount importance.
Absolutely. It's funny, on our last episode of marketSHARE, my friend John McComber, he just authored a book that literally came out at the start of the pandemic called Healthy Buildings. And a phenomenal book, but so relevant to what's going on right now. Big thanks, gentlemen. Brian McCauley, Concert Properties, Carlos Valverde from Silverstein Properties in New York, and Ben Pleat with Kobu in Boston. Gentlemen, big thank you for joining us today.
You're very welcome. Thanks.
So much.
Grateful for everyone's time spent watching marketSHARE to date and today, and your continued support of these important industry conversations. Look out for our next marketSHARE conversation coming up on June the 17th, and check out marketSHARE.tv for previous and upcoming episodes, and to learn more about our partners and our previous guests too. I'm Jason Hardy from Chatterson. Thank you very much for watching.